May 1940. Northern France is collapsing under steel and speed. German columns slice through roads like blades, radios screaming orders faster than boots can march. This is Blitzkrieg, war powered by communication, and the Allies are losing not because they lack courage, but because their voices are being cut mid-sentence. Wires are shredded by shellfire. Signals vanish into static. Units fight blind, surrounded by smoke, screaming engines, and silence where commands should be. In that chaos stands a forgotten British signalman, hands shaking over dials and coils, listening to the war through crackling headphones. He is not a general, not an inventor by title, just a man trained to follow manuals that no longer work. And in the next few days, with nothing but fear, wire, and instinct, he will build a radio system that refuses to be silenced. One that keeps talking while Germany listens for ghosts. Section 1. He had joined the Royal Corps of Signals for steady work, not glory. Before the war, radios were careful things, tested, labeled, dependable in peacetime classrooms. But in France, those rules burned away. The German advance moved too fast. Motorized infantry outran telephone lines. Artillery shattered cables faster than men could repair them. And every time a British set came alive too long, German direction-finding teams triangulated it, calling down fire with terrifying speed. The signalman learned this the hard way. One transmission 30 seconds too long, and the ground answered with explosions. He watched a neighboring unit vanish under shellfire minutes after reporting their position. From then on, every click of the transmit key felt like lighting a match in a dark room full of enemies. Fear became routine. The radio's hum was constant, a living thing pressed against his ears. He could hear panic in the voices, officers demanding updates, platoons asking for orders that never came. And always the same failure. Interference, jamming, silence. German signals units were hunting the air itself, flooding frequencies, tracing voices, turning Allied radios into beacons of death. The manuals offered no solution. They assumed stable lines, predictable fronts, time to set up. Blitzkrieg allowed none of that. The signalman began to understand something terrifying. The war was being won by whoever could talk fastest and survive being heard. At night, under blackout tarps and the distant thunder of tanks, he began to experiment. Not to invent history, but to stay alive. He shortened transmissions to fragments, stripping messages to essentials. He rotated frequencies irregularly, ignoring protocol, trusting instinct over orders. He scavenged components from destroyed sets, coils, crystals, anything that still worked, and rebuilt them into crude relay points that could pass messages without revealing their source. Each change was a risk. Each mistake could mean discovery. He wasn't sure it would work. He wasn't even sure he was allowed to try. But doing nothing meant silence, and silence meant defeat. The first time it worked, he didn't celebrate. A battalion received orders in time to withdraw before encirclement. A gap opened where there should have been a massacre. No one knew why the Germans were late. No report credited a nameless signalman crouched in the dirt, breathing through fear as he killed a transmitter mid-sentence and waited. The Blitzkrieg rolled on, but somewhere inside its roar, a small pocket of resistance kept speaking, just quietly enough to survive. The Germans were adapting, and he could feel it before anyone said it aloud. The air grew crowded with hostile noise, bursts of static that weren't natural, pulses that swept across bands like searchlights. This was no accident. German signals intelligence units were among the best in the world, trained to listen, locate, and destroy. They hunted radios the way artillery hunted movement. Every Allied operator knew the rule: transmit briefly or die. But Blitzkrieg demanded constant coordination, and that contradiction was killing men. The signalman began to realize that survival was no longer about power or range. It was about deception, about becoming something the enemy could not easily hear, track, or understand. He stopped thinking like a technician and started thinking like prey. Instead of strong, clear signals, he weakened them deliberately, tuning sets to operate just above the threshold of intelligibility. Messages arrived faint, half buried in static, but they arrived. He introduced irregular timing, bursts so short they felt unfinished, then long stretches of silence that confused German direction-finding teams trying to plot patterns. He rerouted transmissions through improvised relay operators, turning single voices into a moving target. No single transmitter stayed active long enough to be marked. To the Germans listening, the air became cluttered with whispers instead of shouts, fragments instead of commands. It sounded like chaos. It was anything but. The danger never left him. Each time he pressed the key, his chest tightened, waiting for the inevitable response. Shells, mortars, the screaming descent of steel. He slept in pieces, boots on, headset beside him, always half awake to the sound of the radio. Doubt gnawed constantly. He was breaking procedures written by men far from the front. If it failed, he would not just be wrong, he would be responsible. But the reports coming back were undeniable. Units that stayed connected moved more fluidly. Withdrawals became escapes. German thrusts met resistance where there should have been confusion. The enemy was still faster, still stronger, but no longer perfectly informed. Word spread quietly, never officially. Other signalmen began copying what worked, passing methods by murmured advice rather than written orders. There was no recognition, no praise, only survival. German jamming intensified, but it struggled to pin down what refused to stay still. The Blitzkrieg depended on clarity and speed. What this forgotten signalman introduced was uncertainty. And in war, uncertainty is a weapon. For the first time since the invasion began, the Allies weren't completely deaf. They could hear each other breathe in the dark, and sometimes that was enough to keep going.